You're the Vice President of State Policy for the Data Center Coalition. Uh, Before we start, can you kind of tell us a little bit about your organization?
Sure. Well, the Data Center Coalition, we are the national membership association for the data center industry. So we have 40 plus members, which are leading data center owners and operators, as well as companies that lease large amounts of data center capacity.
So, to start broadly, why should Washington communities see data centers as valuable infrastructure rather than just large private tech projects?
Sure. Well, it's important to remember that data centers are everything that we do every day. It's every telehealth appointment, every electronic healthcare record, online classrooms, every online purchase, banking and financial transactions, 911 geolocation services, state and local governments, you name it. But most importantly, I think Washington has a significant history with data center development, and that's really shown in the economic benefits that the industry has brought. That includes 127,700 in total employment contribution in the state as of 2024. With that, is $17.4 billion in labor income, 33.8 billion to Washington GDP, and then I think most importantly, 1.5 billion in taxes to the state government in Washington and 883 million in taxes to local governments in Washington. These are significant economic development projects. They bring jobs, they bring labor income. These are good paying jobs. They bring economic activity and they bring vital tax revenue to both the state and communities.
hmm So, critics argue that data centers use enormous amounts of electricity and could force utility providers to build more generation, transmission, or substation capacity. Was wondering how you think communities should make sure that ordinary ratepayers aren't responsible for picking up all these costs without just banning the projects altogether.
Well, it's important to remember first off that data center electricity use is reflective of all of us. Consumers and businesses are demanding access to digital infrastructure. We'll create twice as much data in the next 5 years as we did in the previous 10. The average household has 21 connected devices. When you laptops and phones, watches, smart TVs, ring doorbells, garage doors, lights, my oven is connected to Wi-Fi. All of that requires digital infrastructure. I think there's a perception that all of this is for AI and this is an AI profit grab. It's a growth driver, there's no question. But the vast majority of data centers in Washington, but also being built and put into operation today, are for cloud infrastructure. And that's the underpinning of the 21st century economy. But for our part as an industry, we are fully committed to paying our full cost of service for electricity. We expect utilities and regulators to help ensure that that's the case. We are an end user, a customer. When we get our bill, we expect that that is our bill in full, that no other costs are being passed along to ratepayers that should be assigned to us. Now, we're not resting on our laurels on that. We've been supportive of contracts and policies throughout the country to ensure utilities have certainty there and the right types of mechanisms so that costs are allocated appropriately. But we're in this high growth period and we're experiencing electricity load growth because of data centers, but also manufacturing and electrification, importantly, of vehicles, homes, businesses, and industries, and hydrogen production. So it's imperative upon all of us to make vital, needed investments in our electricity grid. And I think for data centers, what we see is that data centers and large loads can help put downward pressure on rates. So because you're a large load, you absorb more of those fixed costs, the needed infrastructure maintenance that hasn't been done for about 20 years. And then you're able to put downward pressure on rates for others. We see it in Indiana, where Indiana Michigan Power announced they're lowering rates because of data center revenue coming in, and that's rates for residential ratepayers. Georgia Power, same thing. DTE Energy in Michigan, Entergy down along the Gulf Coast. Even PG&E in California, of all places, has said we've been able to keep rates 11% lower because of data centers. So there's tremendous opportunity here for data centers to facilitate investment in the grid, to pay for that investment, and we are fully committed to that.
So, state lawmakers here in Washington earlier a few months ago, they were considering a bill that could have required data centers to front some of the costs in terms of expanding the electrical grid, water use, and other stuff, so it wouldn't fall on ratepayers. It didn't go anywhere. It was a short session, so they're probably going to pick it up next year. But was wondering what you think. Should developers be required to pay the full cost of the infrastructure required to serve these data centers when they're building them?
Absolutely, absolutely. The costs that are attributable to the data center should be borne by the data center. There is no question. We were heavily engaged in that bill, and we provided language throughout the process saying, hey, this is how it should be structured based on best practices from throughout the country. DCC has been party to settlements in utility tariff cases throughout the country, saying, yes, this is a framework that works. it makes sense. Indiana, Michigan Power, like I mentioned, that was the first large load tariff in the country. And now we're seeing the fruits of that with rates being lowered. So it's important, I think, that throughout these discussions, I think lawmakers, should focus on best practices. We raised significant concerns about many other provisions that were being put into that package that were ultimately going to probably increase costs, but also were unworkable and were going to make operations in Washington significantly challenging because they didn't reflect realistic capabilities. And so we strongly urge lawmakers to focus on the tariff provisions that make the most sense, that are based on best practices that have been successful. Unfortunately, the bill did not get to that point. But we are fully committed to being that engaged stakeholder in 2027 to find a workable policy that reflects realistic operational conditions, but ensures that ratepayers are protected and costs are allocated appropriately.
So, at the end of the legislative session, to help close a multi-billion dollar budget deficit, the state majority had eliminated a tax exemption for replacement equipment at data centers. And there was a lot of concerns among Republicans, especially those representing areas in central and eastern Washington where more of these data centers are, that eliminating the tax exemption would cause these facilities to want to move away once it comes times to replace this equipment. I was wondering your thoughts on that and whether or not the elimination of the tax cut or the tax credit pushes away future projects from coming to Washington.
I think it will, and I think it will have a dramatic impact on Washington. And there's a couple of reasons why. These are large capital purchases. And they're rolling capital expenses. The servers change over on average about every 3 to 5 years. That's about their useful life, as well as evolutions in technology. And I think that's lost in this debate. The new chips coming out, the new servers coming out are something like 25% more energy efficient. So you can do a lot more compute with less in that facility. And I think, basically Washington created a disincentive to change over that equipment. There have been long-standing sales tax exemptions for manufacturing equipment. And what that does is it defrays some of the cost of the inputs to then generate the economic activity and the tax revenue on the output side. And the same applies to data centers. So I think the state really made a very strong mistake. I think they were going to lose investment. And quite frankly, they're going to have old, inefficient equipment in their data centers. And that's why I think it's mind-boggling that the state basically said, hey, we don't want you to change over your equipment. We're going to create a disincentive for you to do that. And I think, when it comes down to tax revenue and closing a budget gap, I mean, 1.5 billion in taxes to Washington state government in 2024, and that's actually net of incentives. It's based on data from PwC, publicly available data in 2024, and they net out the incentives there. So the industry still contributed $1.5 billion to the state government. And so I think it was an unfortunate mistake. I think it's going to have significant repercussions in the state for data center development.
What do you think the elimination of that tax exemption means for communities in central and eastern Washington that were rather small before, but in recent years have seen significant economic development because of these data center projects? What's it going to mean in 5 years when they need to replace this equipment? And if they leave, what would that mean to the communities?
I think you'll see a loss of vital tax revenue for the community, that $883 million in taxes to local governments. I think it is really clear that, data centers, like in Quincy, for example, have had a dramatically positive impact on that community. The revenue they generate, the jobs that they generate as well, has really been put back into infrastructure, into services, into schools in that community. Data centers, I think, pay average double the average county wage in Quincy. This is a tremendous economic opportunity. I think it's going to really throw in doubt whether or not these facilities can continue to expand in that region and whether or not those facilities, for example, the multi-tenant facilities that lease out space to other tenants, it's their tenants that get the sales tax exemption because their tenants have their proprietary servers there. I think it's going to be in doubt whether or not those tenants will renew and stay in Washington. And so I think it's going to have a significant impact in the future.
Would you say that in trying to solve the state's own budget problems, that they're creating more problems for the localities?
I think they are, right? When all of the what this comes down to is local economic development opportunities. There are communities throughout the state in which data centers really fit their economic development needs very well. And we've seen that very much be the case in a place like Quincy, especially as I mentioned. For some communities, maybe a data center development doesn't fit their needs as well. But by doing this, taking this state level action, the state, I think, has inadvertently hurt local governments and their ability to attract the projects that best fit their needs. And so I do think that this was a short-term reaction that will have long-term repercussions.
So, water use has become one of the biggest concerns around large data centers, especially in communities already worried about aquifers, rivers, and long-term growth, especially in Spokane with their aquifer underneath the city. How much water do modern data centers actually require, and what safeguards should local governments look for before approving one?
Well, I think the facts and the data have to matter here, especially the context as well. Data centers are amongst the most efficient water users in the economy. We use less than semiconductor manufacturing. We use less than food and beverage production. We use less water than what's lost to water leaks in municipal water systems on an annual basis. We know in places like Virginia, the world's largest data center market, 83% of data centers use as much, if not less, water than a large commercial office building. In Texas, the second largest market in the country, data centers are less than 0.5% of the state's overall water use in 2025. This is an industry that's been actively deploying water efficient cooling technologies for years. They're not new, they're not novel. They've really developed innovative technologies and techniques that have been incorporated into building designs for years. Or even in the case of Microsoft, which has had that facility in Quincy that needed to be upgraded, they upgraded it and they put in a water reuse facility as well, together with the city of Quincy, paid for it in order to facilitate more recycled water and water reuse in the community. So this is an industry that I think, despite all the noise, has very much always used water sustainably. I think it's absolutely fair for communities, and communities should ask questions. People should ask questions. Hey, how is this project going to use resources sustainably? What does this project mean for our community? Does it fit our economic development goals? But I think what's very clear is that this is an industry that develops sustainably. Companies like Microsoft have significant water positivity goals. So to help restore more watersheds, put more water back in, into those watersheds than what they use on an annual basis, and they are actively, achieving significant progress towards those goals by 2030. So we'll continue to be an efficient water user and prioritize resource sustainability.